Did the Rams just sign their wide receiver 3? Will Tutu Atwell have a big breakout season? That's coming up on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily? Welcome to another edition of Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available over on YouTube, so check us out over on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and most importantly, drop your Rams takes down below. When all your Rams takes down below in the comment section, we might use them for a future episode. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, the Lakers, the Dodgers, but now I'm covering the Rams for Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by Mr. Travis Rogers, the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio network, ESPN 710 LA. He's entering his 8th season covering the team. You can follow him on Twitter at Travis Rogers. Now, Trav, the Rams have made a signing. We might have some clarity as to who will be that wide receiver 3. Can he compete? Yep. You ready to get into it, my man?
Let's do it. They know Sean McVay likes to throw the ball, so any wide receiver on the roster is a potential guy we're going to have to know.
Absolutely. And in this case, they're not just shopping at the 99-cent store. They're shopping at the clearance section at the 99-cent store, okay? They bring in Tyler Johnson, who, if you look at him, a lot of Rams fans, when they announce the sign, they're like, oh, it's not DeAndre Hopkins. It's not D-Hop. Right. They were thinking maybe they get D-Hop. No, that's not what they're trying to do. If you look at his size, 6'1", 206, he was a 5th-round pick by the Bucs back in 2020, kind of buried in that Buccaneers depth chart with Brady wanting the veterans there to be a win-now team. But in his rookie season, 12 receptions for 169 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns in 14 games. Also, Rams fans might remember him for drawing that critical pass interference in the NFC Championship game against Kevin King. Then this guy has been with a bunch of teams after that. He was with the Texans that was released after playing just 2 games in H-Town. Last year, he signed with the Raiders on a future reserve contract before he was released. In his career, 48 receptions for 529 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, Travis, let's start right here. Is this a nothing burger, or is this a guy that you think maybe could contribute?
Well, I guess it depends on what we're talking about that's on the nothing burger. What are you trying to accomplish with the burger? Are you trying to feed yourself? Or are you intentionally trying to lose weight, right? Are you making the burger so bad that you won't actually eat it, right? It depends on how you're looking at this. I think, again, I know Rams fans don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like the idea of having to take such a long-term view that you're thinking about next year before this year has even started. Look at what they're doing. Look at what the roster is. Look at how they're putting this together. Look at how active they were in free agency. Look at how active they were in getting rid of their own players. Look at how active they were in keeping some of their own guys. This is a team that has a very specific plan moving forward. They don't want to say it out loud. They don't want to say that this is what we're doing. But Tyler Johnson, as a, quote, move, I think kind of speaks to what you might see on this team. He's an NFL guy in the sense that he's played in the NFL, but I don't think that he really changes your team in any significant way. Look at the teams that he hasn't stuck with, whether it's the Raiders, whether it's Houston. These are not high echelon NFL teams. These are teams that are either bad or kind of in the middle of the pack. And I think that the Rams are trying to find bodies that can perform for them, that can play for them, but not necessarily put them over the top, because that might not be what they're trying to get done this season.
Yeah, I don't think you make this sign thinking, oh, this is the last piece of the puzzle for a Super Bowl run or a playoff run or anything like that. But there are some things to like. I mean, you can see why they've identified him as someone that maybe they could bring in and he could have some sort of impact. Of course, you know, we love a good handle. His handle is T-Money. I like that. I respect that about him. That's pretty nice, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't have great speed, 4.7 40. Like I told you, my friend texted me, he said the prototypical Sean McVay receiver doesn't have great speed. It's not fast, but he does have strength as a route runner. He has the potential to be one of those solid over the middle, mid-range receivers, crossing routes, digs, short passes. So we know the kind of role he would have if he got some playing time. But yeah, if you look at him as a whole, it doesn't seem like this is something that's going to move the needle or anything like that. But to your point earlier, this guy does, when you look at the wide receiver room as it stands, he does have a decent shot of making that 53-man roster.
Oh, yeah. No, he's got a good chance of making this team because you've got Kupp, you've got Van Jefferson, and then you've got a bunch of, all right, let's see what we have. Let's see what who the next man up might be. Look, one of these guys that we don't think is going to be an impact guy, one of these guys that we think might not get a ton of reps, might not get a ton of snaps, might not get a ton of targets, will. That's just the way that this thing goes, right? There's always somebody that kind of presents themselves, whether it's in camp, whether it's in the early part of the season. And Tyler Johnson may be one of those guys. Like you said, this isn't a guy with the burning speed. This isn't a guy that's going to light it up at a combine. He is a guy that's good on jump balls. This is a guy that is a fairly physical player, which, like you mentioned, kind of fits into the Sean McVay mold, but I think it kind of speaks to what they're going to try to do offensively. This is not a team that's going to push the ball down the field necessarily. This is a team that's going to throw it to the running backs, throw it to the tight end, throw it to Cooper Kupp, and try to find options for these other, whoever, whether it's Skoranek, whether it's Atwell, whether it's, any of these other guys, Johnson, that might slide in there. These are guys that are going to be fighting for repetitions.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a depth piece. That's what he is. And is a team that's headed towards training camp, is right around the corner. It's one of those signings where when the official team account tweets it out, you'll see 5 tweets underneath saying slow news day or or stuff like that. But the reality is, I do think, just to look at the Mitch Latta half full on this one, I do think he can provide some value as a guy, as you mentioned. He has that plus vertical. He's known as a contested catch warrior. Yep. Strong hands, big, strong physical, but also too, I think they could use another red zone threat to complement Cooper Kupp. And I think that's something you want to look at as well. Another 6'1" guy, and you look at, they have a bunch of taller receivers from 6'1" and up to kind of offset the size of Tutu Atwell, which we're going to talk about in our next segment. So yeah, is it something, nothing, or everything? I wouldn't say it's nothing, because I do think there's a chance he can make this 53-man roster, but I don't think it's a guy that's going to change the Rams offense. But one thing I want to ask you before we wrap up this segment, and do you think this speaks to how the Rams feel about the receivers that they've drafted in recent years? When you got Tutu, when you got Nakua, you got Skoranek, Jefferson, McCutcheon. Do you think this says, hey, maybe these guys aren't cutting it, or just a depth piece to kind of supplement that?
Can it be both? Because I think it's both. I think that you've had some picks like, Tutu, look, I feel like I pile on him perhaps maybe a little bit more than I should, but for where he got picked in the second round to what he's brought to your team, he's been a huge disappointment. Van Jefferson, a relatively high draft pick, he's been an important part of what you do. He gets the ball and he's a good player. Everyone else is kind of a throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. And I think that's where Tyler Johnson falls into. If you find an opportunity for him and it works, thinking like McCutcheon from a year ago, who kind of separated himself in the preseason. It didn't really translate to the regular season, but I'm sure that's similar to what they're trying to find in Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think fits the mold, makes some sense. We'll see what he does. We'll see if he can come in and have an opportunity, because the reality is that window's wide open. If a guy steps up, he can absolutely earn his spot. But coming up in our next segment, we're going to talk about the aforementioned Tutu Atwell. Can he earn the spot as the Rams' third wide receiver? Could he have a breakout year? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right, D-Mac, but first let's talk about getting that good snack on, right? The delicious snack, but you don't want a ton of calories. You don't want a ton of sugar. Then why not try the best tasting protein bar ever, Built? You absolutely got to try it. So you want to make that healthier snack choice, but you don't want to compromise on taste. This is where Built Bars and Built Puffs come in. They are healthy and they taste amazing. They are so good, you're thinking there's no way these things are good for me. And here's what makes them so good. They are covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. Always a great way to start with a snack. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. My favorite, you've heard me mention over and over again, is that coconut almond one. And I don't know how they do it, but the bars do taste like a candy bar while maintaining those amazing macros. And what's even better, they're good for you. They're healthy. Only 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, and an unbelievable whopping 17 grams of protein. And right now, you don't have to wait to get a box. For a long time, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Right now, you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, while you can still get those specialty flavors at Built.com. That's right. You can head to your nearest Walmart today, walk into the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars, a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you happen to be close to a Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff. And yes, you can all thank me later.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Also, if you haven't yet, check us out over on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and also drop your Rams takes down below. Do you think that Tutu Atwell could have a breakout season? We want all your Tutu takes down below in the comment section. Now, Trav, in our segment number 2, we're talking Tutu Atwell because he is definitely, in my opinion, one of the more polarizing Rams players in recent memory. You have the Tutu truthers out there, and then you have the people that say Tutu ain't well, right? I mean, I'm somewhere in between that, but I mean, just before we get into it, where do you stand right now on Tutu Atwell heading into next season?
I think it's really hard to look at him as anything other than a really big disappointment that he got drafted. He was their first pick in the draft a couple of years ago, not a first rounder, but their first pick. And when you take a player where Atwell was taken in the draft, you need production. It cannot just be somebody that occasionally gets behind the defense and catches a long ball, but somebody that is on the field play after play after play. That's an impact player. You don't want a gadget guy. You can find a gadget guy in the 6th or 7th round. Cool. Go knock yourself out. But where they took him, I think, is not commiserate with his value as a football player. I think what's interesting and what they've done with him, and maybe we're getting to the point where maybe something will change here. One of the things that I admire the most about the Rams is their ability to realize when they got it wrong, is their ability to say, okay, we need to pay Todd Gurley all this money. No, Todd Gurley's not that player. Boom, he's gone. Same thing with Jared Goff. That, okay, he's fine. He's good enough. We're going to give him that $100 million. And then, we can get better. Okay, fine. Let's move on from him. They don't double down on mistakes very often. And I think Tutu Atwell, in my opinion, has been a mistake. I think that they do need to move on from him. I think that they need to find somebody that's a more down in and down out sort of player and not a gadget player the way that Atwell is. But like you said, Doug, and like we were talking about in the last segment with Tyler Johnson, that they need guys. They need somebody to step into that third wide receiver role. And I'm sure he'll be given a chance in camp and in the preseason, but he's got to grab it by the neck and get it because this is his third bite at the apple.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just kind of going back to what you said on Tutu Atwell about him being their first pick there back in 2021. Yeah, that's where the investment is. That is why they're not going to punt on him earlier than later. Because if he was a later round pick at this point, they would have already most likely moved off of him. But he does have the talent. He does have the potential. I will say, though, like you mentioned, the production just hasn't been there. 18 receptions, 298 yards, 1 receiving touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown in 21 career games. And, of course, when you talk about Tutu, it's the speed. Everyone talks about the speed. He's too fast, too furious. And, yes, he can take the top off a defense. And to kind of make the case for him to kind of say, okay, is there a chance that he could have a breakout year, step up for the Rams? I will say that things were working against him in the fact that he didn't get to play enough with Matthew Stafford. And when he did, we saw the catch he made against the New Orleans Saints. He has the ability to take the top off of defenses. And also, too, you look at when he was playing with Wolford and when he was playing with Bryce Perkins, they just did not have the arm to try to make plays. I mean, we saw him stretch the field and get behind his defender, but still, those throws were short. You saw some pass breakups there. Do you think there's a situation where, hey, you want to see him with a full season of Matthew Stafford and get a bigger opportunity to see what he has before we say, okay, the 2-2 chapter's over?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think that's fair. And I think that that's not an unreasonable position to take. And yes, there are some circumstances that led to perhaps him not playing at the highest level that he's capable of. But I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that he has trouble staying on the field, that he's a smaller guy. He's just not a big, rugged player that when he first came into the league, they tried to use him as a return man. And every time he got hit, he was down on the ground. Everybody in the stands, everybody in the pass box, I'm sure everybody on the sidelines was, okay, is he going to get up again? Turns out he didn't get up a lot. He was easily hurt. He's got to find a way to stay on the field. He's probably got to find a way to put on a little weight. You don't want to sacrifice any of that speed, but I remember during the preseason last year when Andrew Siciliano kind of let the cat out of the bag that he was 160 pounds or 158 pounds. This is the NFL, brother, right? I mean, the 150-pound guys are not going to last in the NFL. I mean, punters are 200 pounds. Kickers are 180. That you're running and returning kicks and trying to get behind guys and letting these guys take a run at you. He's going to have to be as fast as he is to avoid it. And I just don't know if it's going to work out. I liked the concept of Tutu Atwell, but the reality of it has been disappointing.
Yeah, it's tough to get past the size, as you mentioned, 165 pounds. That's probably with like 2 bricks in his pockets. But still, Yeah, I mean, definitely is undersized. But yeah, I will say, though, just kind of looking at his size and looking at how they can basically prevent him from getting jammed, that's something that also falls on Sean McVay. And Cohen and McVay also said they didn't do enough to get him opportunities. I think you want to see him in a situation where he's in motion. They're motioning him to prevent him from getting jammed. At the end of the day, you have to find a way to get yourself open. But yeah, I mean, one play that comes to mind last season against the Seahawks, I mean, he had Tariq Woolen beat, and Wolford, he just underthrew him to the point where it was an easy pass breakup. And there's a play where if that's Matthew Stafford instead of Wolford, maybe that's a touchdown. Maybe we're talking differently about Tutu Atwell. So yeah, I think it's a big season for him. I think it's a make or break season for him. And I think it's a perfect year because there's no pressure on him. There's no expectations. I mean, year one, pretty much a redshirt year, right?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point that this is the season where you can really kind of say, all right, let's see what it is. Let's see if he can make what we were hoping going to happen. That use that speed to do the things that you're talking about, to maybe use them a little bit in that jet sweep game. I know they did that a little bit last year. That's a play that they've run to some success with Cooper Kupp, with Robert Woods. You want to throw it way back to Tavon Austin back in the day. They would use him a little bit in that situation. But as far as a down in, down out player, this may be his last chance with this team because there is a big hole in that wide receiver 3 spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, too, I mean, you saw the quarterbacks, Wolford and Perkins. They did not have the requisite arm strength to get the ball when he was open. Then you get Baker Mayfield. He started to get more targets. I mean, you saw in the Raiders game, 9 targets, 5 catches for 50 yards, had a nice 22-yard catch. Baker Mayfield leads him on that 98-yard drive, and he literally turns into a Ram, headbutting his teammates. Hey, that had me fired up. Baker had me wanting to run through a brick wall. That was the best moment of the season, right, Travis?
I was just going to say, D-Mac, that what you're just describing feels like it happened 38 years ago, and it happened last season towards the end of the season. And I remember doing the postgame show, me and Kirk Morrison looking at each other like, what did we just see? Did we just see Baker Mayfield literally walk in here 5 minutes before kickoff and lead an NFL team, a not a very good NFL team, to a come-from-behind win in the fourth quarter? It was by far the best moment of the season. Maybe the only moment last season where you're like, that was awesome. A very difficult year last year, but that was certainly a high point.
No, yeah. I mean, for me, that was like, wow, this guy does throw an unbelievably pretty ball. Great to see. We'll never forget Baker Mayfield. I almost wanted to, I was rushing, Joe. We got to sign this guy. He's the quarterback for the future.
You know what he's going to be? He's going to be one of those guys that, whatever you and I are doing 10 years from now or 20 years from now, he's like, wait, Baker Mayfield was on the Rams? Are we really? Was he actually with the Rams? Like, yeah, he was there for 6 games at the end of the 2022 season. He was there. He's going to be one of those guys, and he had a moment. It was super. I liked Baker Mayfield. I thought he was fun to watch. I mean, anyone that saw that video of him throwing passes at the Tampa practice the other day probably isn't dying to get him back, but he did a good job for the Rams. I thought that he did the best he possibly could have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be the Joe Namath school of, they were Rams quarterbacks, right? So Joe Namath, Baker Mayfield, all of those greats. But coming up in our final segment here on Locked On Rams, who will take that wide receiver 3 spot? We're going to take a deeper dive on the wide receiver room right now and see who can earn that role. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And as a reminder, we are on YouTube. Join the party. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and drop your Rams takes down below. Who do you see as the Rams wide receiver 3 this season? Let us know down below in the comment section. Now, Travis, here in our third segment, we're going to look at that wide receiver 3 spot. We talked about Tutu Atwell, but there's some other names out there that could take on that role. Of course, you got Ben Skoranek. You got my guy, Puka Nacua, still getting those Puka shells ready for the season. But do you think, you look at that role, is this a situation, in your opinion, Travis, where someone takes that role outright, or could you see wide receiver 3 by committee? I mean, where do you think that stands right now for this team?
Well, I think one of the things that Sean McVay has been really good at is understanding when you have a guy, keep using the guy, right? That you're going to have Kupp in wide receiver 1. You're going to have Jefferson in wide receiver 2. And like you just talked about, D-Mac, this is a wide open competition for that 3rd spot. So if a guy like Ben Skoranek comes in and does well, and I think he's probably your inside man at this point because he's been with the program for a long time. He's been able to be in Sean McVay's system for a long long time. He understands what it is that McVay wants. He's got pretty good hands. He's a pretty tough player, that he'll get the most reps at the jump. But all of those other guys behind him, whether it's Tyler Johnson, whether it's Nakua, whether it's anybody, McCutcheon, that they're bringing in off the street, undrafted players, I think that all of those guys will get opportunities to do it, because Sean McVay has proven if you can make plays, you can play for him. And if you keep making plays, you keep getting your number called.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is going to be the plan for this team. It's going to be a meritocracy. Who's ever out there performing, you're going to see them get more reps. I think you're going to see certain games where Ben Skoronek's going out there and he's playing that hybrid role, just disguising their scheme and just going out there making plays. Not the fastest guy, of course, but definitely has those physical tools to be a threat. I think Puka Nacua is the guy who there's people out there saying maybe he's wide receiver 2 by the end of the season. I think it's going to be a big year for Van Jefferson, but I'm hoping Puka Nacua, the versatility he brings, hopefully we see that jet sweep implemented early on, and he can get it done with that speed and athleticism at that role. And of course, there's Tutu Atwell. I mean, he has to go back to Tutu Atwell. Can he be a guy in that role that takes the top off of defenses, stretches the field, makes plays early? Because I think when you bring up the best point in that, it's going to be who's making plays, who's getting it done early, because I think that's going to really set the tone at this position for the season. Because let's say Tutu Atwell, let's say he gets off to a slow start and he's not performing well, you're going to see everyone out there, they're going to be dogging the pick again, saying, okay, why don't we pick Creed Humphrey, right? Who's been one of the better centers for the Kansas City Chiefs. You're going to start to hear those whipsters once again.
Yeah, look, I guess it all depends on what Sean McVay wants out of that spot, right? Do you want somebody who can hit some home runs? That would be Atwell. Do you want somebody that's more of a I don't know, a possession guy, for lack of a better description, and that might be somebody like Ben Skoranek? Or do you want somebody that's kind of a combination of these things, that might be able to hit a few home runs, that might be able to do something underneath, that might block a little bit better, that might be a more complete route runner? And maybe that's a guy like Nakua. It's like, what do you want? Because with Kupp, you kind of get a little bit of everything other than maybe that super deep threat. With Jefferson, you do get a little bit of that deep threat and somebody that's been in. So what do you want out of that third position? I think that, what flavor ice cream you're looking for in that spot is probably the most important part. And if you get it, you got to hold on to it, because I don't think any of these guys have those positions on lock, and you need to continue to perform, or the next guy is going to come in and give it a shot as well.
No, I agree 100%. And I think you got the different flavors, you got the different options, but just kind of going back to our conversation and discussion on Tutu Atwell, I do want to see, yes, he does lack size and durability. Yes, he is limited, but let's see what he had. Just give him the full runway just to see what he has. Nothing to lose. Let's see if he can be that guy, and then we'll feel better about where he is as a player. We'll stop the discussions about him, because we'll see, does he really have it? I do like Moose, though. I think Moose is a guy, of course, going to move those chains, get those first downs. I think he's a guy that if you see this offense compete, you'll see him doing the dirty work, making plays underneath, getting first downs. And we'll see Tyler Johnson, what he can do. Of course, you got McCutcheon in the mix as well, as a guy who can provide some depth. So it's not the wide receiver room that we've seen in the past with some of the big names, Bobby Trees, Robert Woods, of course, no OBJ or guys like that. But still, there is talent there. And, of course, you still have Super Kupp. You have Cooper Kupp, who is a top 5 receiver, contrary to, of course, what Devontae Adams thinks. He still is one of the better receivers in all of the National Football League.
Yeah, no, look, they've got maybe the best, and then they've got another guy that's very capable in Van Jefferson. I think that he's a regular part of what you're doing offensively. And then you've got a line of guys, all of them with more questions than answers. I think you're right. I think Atwell gets the first bite at it because of the capital, the draft capital that they spent on him. And I think you make a good point too, D-Mac, that they might not know for sure exactly what they have. I think they have a pretty good inkling of it, but this idea of, let's put him out there for a few games in a row, really have him be a part of this offense. And then whether it's a month or a half a month, like 2 games, 4 games, 5 games, whatever, and then really be able to make that determination with a real offensive line, with a real running game, with a real quarterback, and decide whether or not he's your guy. Because after a month or so of that, if he still isn't popping, then you probably know that it's never going to pop.
Yeah, exactly. He deserves that opportunity. And then if you can't get it done with Matthew Stafford, he can't make plays, then I think, okay, then maybe you start the process of moving off him. But I still think it's premature. I still think, hey, man, cover baseball. You don't want to sell your stock on Gavin Stone or some of these prospects until they get the full opportunity to see what they have. Because last thing you want to see is you move off that player and he goes to another organization and he realizes his potential. So that's definitely the last thing you want to see. But let us know down below in the comment section, who do you want to see as the Rams wide receiver 3? I think it's going to be wide receiver 3 by committee, but let me know down below. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMac_LA. And of course, that man to your right is Mr. Travis Rogers, the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio network, ESPN 710 LA. You can follow him at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house is Locked On Rams House?